So our next panel is a very interesting one. I think we have two very good moderators. We have Karl Deutsch and Bonnie Dunbar. Karl is the CEO of Athena Global, and he lives in a great part of the country up in Victoria, British Columbia, and has joined us down here for the summit. Karl played a primary role with the Canada arm and played a role really with bringing Canada into the space station program, and was also, after his time with the Canadian Space Agency, was president of the International Space University. And we're very pleased to have him here with us. And our other co-moderator is Bonnie Dunbar, who flew 5 times in space, and now she is she's a distinguished professor of aerospace at Texas A&M University, and formerly was at the University of Houston, where she was in charge of provided the leadership for setting up the STEM program for the university, and also was the CEO of the Museum of Flight up in Seattle. So we're pleased to have both of them with us, and I'll turn it over to you all.
Thank you, George, for those kind introductory words. Let me first say that I don't think we could have had a better introduction to this panel and its topic matter than the lunchtime address by Charlie Bolden. It really put into place very clearly why there is an education panel at these sessions and why there is an outreach panel. Space has been a stimulator since the earliest days for people to strive higher and for young people to join in this adventure. There's no question that with Apollo, space became a major pull in terms of getting young people involved in science and engineering. And there was another bump with shuttle, but it hasn't had the same sort of influence in the past years, in part because there are other competing technologies which are interesting people. And maybe one of the things we should be looking at in space, instead of giving it the sole responsibility of drawing people into science and engineering, is to look at some sort of partnerships with other emerging technologies so that together we can go towards a future where the integrated involvement of an international set of people is what is going to be necessary for both advancing society and for giving society interesting jobs to follow through. Now we have a good panel here, and I'll introduce them by name and organization, but I've asked each of them, when they give their introductory comments on their particular discussion point, to also indicate why they're here in this particular role on this particular panel. My co-moderator, Bonnie, has already been mentioned. Next to her is Olga Banova, University of Houston, Heather Domjan, University of Houston, Francisco Fusco from FICE, Amanda Hackler, NSBRI, Michael Lembeck, CEP Stone, LLC, and Jancy McPhee, Sci Art Exchange. So that's our panel, and I'll turn it over now to Bonnie to say any opening comments she might have before we go on to the panel members.
Well, I don't have many opening comments right now. I'll save those a little bit later, but I would like to just reinforce the concept that space can be and space exploration is a tremendously unifying and inspiring theme for our youth, and as long as they know about it. And I think one of the things you're going to hear about it is, how can we partner on the universal international theme, but also how can we just give visibility to what we're doing so that our youth can be excited. So with that, I'll turn it over.
Olga, it's all yours.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me to this incredible summit and to meet all of you. It's a very special event. I'm here representing University of Houston's and the only in the world Master of Science in Space Architecture program. The program was initiated by a group of Johnson Space Center engineers. Not the program actually, it's space architecture, but Master of Science as a degree was created because a group of engineers from Johnson Space Center came to us and said that they want to learn more about other sides that outside of their scope of expertise. They want to learn how to bring everything together and how to make space flight more human, if I may say so, and how to look outside of the box and to see and learn about a holistic approach to mission planning and design of all mission elements. And they discovered that center, space architecture at the University of Houston. They came to us and wanted to have this degree initiated. That's how Master of Science started. That's important to understand that they already knew, they were already professionals, but they still wanted to learn. They still had passion for learning more, to looking at the problems from different perspectives, to learning new methods and methodology, how you can tackle those incredibly critical and difficult problems when you design a space mission and plan a space exploration roadmap ahead. I also was very fortunate to participate in several international student programs, and one of them is directed by Mr. Abbey, and it's Moscow Summer Intern program that involves 6 universities around the country. And we bring the students to Moscow summer program that is hosted by Moscow Technical University, Bauman Moscow Technical University. And their program has been around for 26 years now. Professor Victoria Mayorova is the heart and soul and engine of the program. And every summer, more than 60 international students from all over the world come to that for 2 weeks, to spend 2 weeks in Moscow, to learn more about Russian space program, to learn about themselves and their counterparts from other countries. Students from Bauman University join them, and they work together on a technical project that the theme of the project they don't know before they come. So it's really hard to tackle this complex space-related design and the mission overall in 2 weeks, when you just met new people from different countries, different disciplines, but they always succeed. And the most important what they learn from that 2 weeks, it's not even this technical side of it, but how to work with each other, how to work in teams and understand and respect each other's opinion, and also understand how to implement these other visions of others in the design, in their vision. They stay friends after the program ends, and now many of them already graduated and they started new companies. They work together. They in different they have businesses. They work for ESA. They work for NASA. I meet our graduates, I would say, when I go to international congresses and conferences. And it's always such a pleasure to see how that passion that they started at school, and then they continued in this program in summer, it continues in their life. How they see each other, not as competitors necessarily, but as the parts of the same big vision that Charlie was talking about. That's how to make this stuff happen. Well, another program that I would like to mention, and it's actually also happening since 1998, initiated by university in Sweden and also Johnson Space Center. And these students from Lund University, they are architects and industrial designers. They come to Houston every fall, and before they were fall and spring, they work on projects related to space exploration. They have to identify the problems and then present unique and unexpected sometimes solutions to then a nice and very distinguished peer-reviewed jury at Johnson Space Center. Also, few ideas got some interest from NASA, but also few ideas became startups for their businesses when students graduated, and now they have several successful businesses in Europe, and also it's in other countries. They are coming from Asia, from all over the world to that program. Basically, I can talk about these international programs forever and about space architecture also forever, but I hope that you will have some questions, and then I can answer these related questions later.
Thank you, Olga. Heather.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure and honor to be here with you to talk about education. I'm the interim executive director of the Science UH STEM Center, and following in the footsteps of Dr. Bonnie Dunbar, we have collaborated very well over the years. The importance of education and STEM, that we have future jobs that we do not yet know of. And I'm here to be able to help bridge the gap that consistently is persistent among science and mathematics and our students in elementary, middle, and high school. We seem to have the ability, as the University of Houston STEM Center, to have collaboration with outreach with community members and with school districts to be able to ensure that space, medicine are high priorities on their list. It takes many capacities and skill sets for students of all various ages and levels and economic discrepancies, that they may have challenges, but knowing full well that they have a support system, which we at the University of Houston do want to give them that option to have. We have many programs that we utilize. In fact, I just came from one. We had a STEM symposium this morning of 550 students learning all about STEM and industry. The important about space is that in our curriculum, particularly in science, we have standards. And those standards that students learn, teachers must learn as well in order to be able to teach. And there is a draft that is a revision of our standards in science that will be occurring and is occurring at this time. Students in elementary learn about the planets. They learn about space. They learn about the importance of space and travel. And then they move forward with that, of course, into secondary and 6th grade and 7th grade. And one of the concerns that I would like to alert us to is the importance is that we maintain and sustain the vigor and the inspiration and the continuation of the space program and the awareness and keenness of what we've accomplished thus far. However, the concern here is that in the revision of our standards, we have 6th graders who are learning about history and the future of space travel. However, in 7th grade, the Texas Education Agency and those that be are wanting to strike out that complete standard. So what does that mean for us as educators? It means that space travel and characteristics of understanding the need for learning the content would not be in existence. So at 6th grade, students would then stop learning about space travel thereafter unless they specifically go into specifics of aerospace in their high school careers. So this is concerning because we have, as a space and medicine community, the ability to show forth our desire to want to instill and maintain space within our curriculum by December the 16th to TEA. So as that is a platform by which we look at as U of H STEM Center, we also would like to collaborate with other colleges as well. We need to ensure that the ability of our workforce for space, for STEM, continues. About 50% right now of women, in that respect for that tally, are in the workforce as well as in schools. However, only half of those are in STEM-related careers, and less than that, of course, they graduate in a college degree with STEM. So we have an attrition rate that we're concerned about, not only in college, but also that of in high school. In elementary, middle, and high school, there is a passion. Students enter into STEM education. They know those careers. However, the ability for them to become that much more aware of what those specific instructions entail for those job-related capacities still needs to be ensued. And as the U of H STEM Center, we're able to give them that opportunity of awareness, working with individuals of that capacity. So having the ability, space, we have Space Congress that's going to be here in 2019, and we are ecstatic about that. We have the Lone Star Flight Museum. We also have other capacities. We are NASA bound here in Houston. And so you may wonder, well, why is it that standards are being taken out? Well, comments such as, well, we just don't have enough time, or there's other sufficient information that's being stated in other standards to work with. I don't think that's good enough. I think we need to push the envelope to be able to help our students learn from kindergarten at age 5 all the way up to now. And so with this capacity, it's crucial as we move forward to, just as with Sputnik inspired the ability for the revolution to move forward in the United States, we need to maintain that and move forward with this now at this point. So,
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you so much.
We'll move on to Francisco.
Hi, so the Foundation of International Space Education, which I have the privilege to represent, focuses on international collaboration and promoting STEM study in high school students and younger. So our main program is called United Space School, and many of the participants to this summit actually are actively involved, and I'm very thankful for that. So it reaches 50-55 students every year. The program is bring them together for a mission to Mars, divided in 5 teams, and basically they are each team has a different task. And the program works really well, but of course, as I agree with Mr. Rabbi, which 50 is a small number. At the same time, I think that the numbers are a lot bigger than that, because those students go back into their school, share their experience with their peers, with their friends, with their families. So he reach out, and it's contagious. I guarantee that. But of course, we also use this as to understand better how to expand, besides increasing the number, which has to be done very steadily. You can reach students remotely. However, you have to understand how to communicate with the students. And it's really as harder as we think, because, and this I want to tie up with a couple of things on this summit that were great that I hear and they very pleased me. One of that is communication. So it was great to hear yesterday Chuck Lloyd talking about NASA, looking into that and try to give platforms that actually are more younger generation will receive. But it's really hard to get into that. They use platform and communication that we don't really understand anymore the way that they're using it. They are bombarded with information. They move to one to the next with a very small attention span. Really try to focus on, on something is getting really hard. And this program is helping us understand how they evolve with that. Another great thing is on the that I heard the summit is, we're talking about international collaboration. Of course, this summit promotes that a lot, and it was great yesterday to see, a message from the Chinese space station. And actually, it was great what the NASA administrator said today. But I want to, just from this year school, I want to leave two considerations and not making any comments, just leave it like, I hope with more like food for thoughts. There are two things that really upset me this year, this past edition that ends in August. One was that an Indian student, you have to understand this, in India there's a very tough competition to participate in the school, so she was the winner of, dozens of schools competing to each other. And actually she was supposed to come from Karl, from Tagore School, that is a Chala Kaplan astronaut school, and actually she was the one that connected her institution to us. The program has been run for 20 years, so everybody is on the same page here. Well, she got her visa denied. And we tried to work that out, and it got denied like twice or 3 times, I remember, without even providing an explanation. So, we're dealing with those type of situations, international collaboration. It's important to start to, understand that we have boundary to also to bring people in here. And the other thing that it was really great to hear that those opening to China is because one of the things that they do, they need to come up with a way to finance their project to Mars. So the students, you're never exposed to anything like that, never exposed to space law, so they hear those for the first time. They came up with the idea to create a consortium of space agencies in order to finance the mission to Mars. And so I followed through the weeks that they're here, their involvement. China was involved, and I was very pleased to hear that. But during their final presentation, it was gone. And so I'm like, wait a second, I thought China was part of this consortium. It's gotta be, and it's like, well, yeah, we wanted to, but after, looking at all the complication of the regulations here in the United States, we'll make it was too big an effort. I was shocked to hear that from people from kids. I mean, those are kids that they don't really think about political consideration and things like that. So just food for thought. I think it's important to, learn from these kids as we open up to international collaboration.
Thank you, Francisco. Amanda?
Good afternoon, everybody. So in my capacity at the University Space Research Association, or USRA, I oversee the Air Force Research Laboratory Scholars Program, the NASA Internships Program, and a series of education programs for the Lunar and Planetary Institute. And rather than speaking specifically about what we do for each program in particular, I'd like to share with you what we've learned through a series of very rigorous evaluations that we conduct annually. So one thing that we've learned is that mentoring is absolutely necessary for these students. It's especially critical for underserved and underrepresented students, and it's extremely important that these students have somebody that they can relate to. We found that to improve retention in the STEM workforce pipeline. It also has a tendency to improve self-efficacy. If these students believe that they can overcome challenges or perceived challenges, they're more likely to persist in STEM fields. We also emphasize hands-on, intensive research opportunities at NASA centers throughout the country, and our Air Force bases, and the Lunar and Planetary Institute, which is just right down the road. And immersion. We feel like these students really need to understand what can be offered to them at these centers and at these Air Force bases. So we try to showcase what we call the cool factor. We want them to see NASA's capabilities. We want them to go see the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, and we want them to go to all the Air Force bases and really understand what kind of careers could be offered offered to them there. I hear it time and time again from our folks at NASA and also at the Air Force. They're consistently having to compete with industry because their salaries are not as competitive. But there are other opportunities that can be offered there, and we want them to see that. And real-world career training is especially important. These internships are really intended to increase retention in STEM in the STEM workforce. And so we want them to really understand what a position within one of these organizations will really be like. So they conduct real scientific research. They publish, they present at scientific conferences throughout the United States. It's a real world experience. And we know that these students are entering the STEM workforce because we continue to track them after their participation in each of these programs. And I am encouraged. I'm especially encouraged because just last year, in 2016, our NASA internships program received more than 10,000 applications. We just cannot fulfill the need, or have enough opportunities for these students. We need to continue to offer these opportunities for these students. And they need to be rigorous and they need to be challenging. And we need to show them that there are plenty of opportunities within the government and in other sectors as well. We don't discourage that per se. So just some food for thought.
Thank you very much, Amanda. I'm sure we'll be coming back to a lot of these topics during the question period. Michael.
Thank you. As I mentioned yesterday, I'm on the Aerospace Alumni Board at the University of Illinois, so I thought I'd share today some of my views of the history of STEM as it's applied to Illinois. For those of you not familiar with Illinois, it's the home to the World Series winning Chicago Cubs. Sorry, Astros fans. And the University of Illinois is also home to the Flying Illini, Steve Nagel, Scott Altman, Lee Archambault, and Mike Hopkins. We might not have a good football team, but we've got a pretty good set of other folks that have flown in space before. Personally, I started out roaming the halls of engineering, looking at posters in my senior year for places to go to work. And one of those posters happened to be for the Jet Propulsion Lab in California. And there was an address and a phone number to call, so I went ahead and did that and was lucky enough to be brought out there for a summer job working on the Galileo probe to Jupiter. And that summer, I got to actually write out the design description document for the attitude control system for that, and as a result, was brought back the following summer, now pursuing a master's degree at Illinois. And my benefactor out there, a guy named by the name of Bob Rasmussen, said, hey, we've got a problem on Galileo, maybe you could turn that into a thesis topic, which I did. It was simulating an inertia for all of the actuators on Galileo. When you are in a 1G field, you can't really test the actuators that are built for 0G, similar to problems we have with humans today. How do we test things like that? But we had a solution for it. I got a master's degree out of it, and things progressed from there. Now, at that time, there was nobody at the university that was helping me do this. I saw the poster and did it myself. There were no projects at the university that got me involved with space. It was just basically the coursework and so forth. But since then, over the last 30 years or so, I've come to see that change quite a bit. As Professor Dunbar knows, looking at the students every year, that's probably as close as we get to immortality, because nothing ever changes when you go back. The students never age as we do. In fact, the only thing that ages, that really ages on us are our metaphors. I recently did a talk about how to be successful at Space 3.0 without drinking the Kool-Aid, and got a lot of looks like, what do you mean drinking the Kool-Aid? So you have to be careful about that when you go back to talk to them. But since that time, the students have gotten a number of support from the industry, from NASA, and from other organizations. This past year, the University of Illinois participated in the Undergraduate Design Competition that was sponsored by the AIAA and took all 3 places, first, second, and third. And that was largely a result of not only having a good group of students doing the work, but having a lot of industry involvement coming back to work with the students, critique their projects, and overlooking what they were doing to kind of give them some guidance. Now, that can also have some pitfalls, because when we go back, we're also spreading our myths that we know about. Charlie talked about myths today. Some of those myths are, bigger is better, complexity is evil, and heritage is faster. And that's not always true. And so we have to kind of stay out of the way of the students while giving them some guidance, give them our lessons learned, but try not to influence them from looking down new paths, because that's really important to do. There's also a number of other things that are sponsored by NASA that are helping students today that weren't available in my time. The systems engineering competition that's offered by NASA in the space robotics group. Illinois participated this year and placed in that competition. The NASA Big Idea Challenge, we had another group that did that. So there's a number of little things now that NASA's doing, industry's doing, and things are moving along. Also, back in my day, we didn't really have a machine shop or a hands-on lab. There wasn't 3D printing that you could go down and run off. There wasn't a pick-and-place lab or anything like that. Today, there are a lot of industry-sponsored labs that give you hands-on certain things, or really help out the students to see what path they want to take and how they're doing things. And there's now become a major emphasis on these extracurricular activities, to the point where grade point and extracurricular activities are in a balance. Students at the Illinois level or the Texas A&M level are all performing very high, but it's just so much fun to work on real hardware that sometimes we forget about the coursework, and we're seeing how to balance that out is a big issue. Recently, Illinois, of interest to this group, just added a bioengineering degree. But it's coming through the aerospace engineering department, because that seemed to be the most pertinent place to put it, with all of the things that aerospace engineers have to learn about: fluids, thermal, mechanical, structural types of things. So that'll be an interesting element as Illinois' program moves forward, to see how the bioengineering thing works with the aerospace department and help solve NASA problems. Illinois has also added a nanoset operations lab named after Steve Nagel. That was recently dedicated. 3D and composites are starting to be looked at, and again, this will have applications to the human medical issues that we've been talking about. Scott White at Illinois does a lot of work on taking advanced composite materials and seeing how they interface with the human body in order to give us telemetry and other structural benefits from that. One of the last things I'd like to talk about is the international piece of this, as part of this discussion. If it probably weren't for international students, particularly from China, Illinois' Aerospace Department probably would have merged with the Mechanical Engineering Department several years ago. But that out-of-state tuition has helped fund the program, keep it alive and moving forward, at the expense of dealing with the issue of ITAR. And that's been a very interesting discussion at the college level. We happen to have a Belgium administrator in our department who said, "We don't have to worry about ITAR, we're a university." And our alumni board quickly corrected him and brought in some help to make sure he understood what that problem really was. So I'm sure that's being dealt with at all universities across the country right now, but it's definitely an interesting problem to deal with. Final thing I'd like to mention is I've been doing a lot of work lately with the KBR Wiley Corporation, and KBR is a good example of a page-long list of things that they're doing in terms of residencies at different universities, helping sponsor the work there as it's related to space work. There's a lot of internships that go on that they sponsor and bring in students from the summer to work on NASA projects. So that's also helpful. My colleague, Dr. Jeannie Bopp, is also on the Rice University Professional Science and Engineering Master's Program Board of Directors. So there's a lot of outreach that industry does to help support NASA's programs and the students as they go through their careers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, Jancy.
Hello, everyone. It's really an incredible pleasure to be here and see so many familiar colleagues and friends from the last 15 to 20 years. And most of you know me by my original training. I was a cellular and molecular neuroscientist, and I worked with NASA for 15 years on international research strategies and collaborations. And so your question, why am I here, is a very pertinent one, and so I would like to say that my experience at NASA and also my training is the reason that I am here. And the pertinent parts are, during my exposure at NASA, we talked a lot about innovation, and I did a lot of international work, and I think that I became the teaming queen. I truly believe that good ideas come from places that you don't necessarily anticipate, that they can come from any country, any age group, and any skill background. And so when we talk about really using space as a marvelous umbrella to teach STEM and make everyone to understand the impact that space and science and technology has on their lives and the capabilities that they can contribute to those fields as well, whether as engineers and scientists or as graphic artists, medical doctors, whatever background, you have an opportunity to contribute. So I am now at SciArt Exchange, which is a nonprofit, and we are best known for the Humans in Space Art program, which you may have noticed some of the artwork out there. I cannot take credit for the suit, but I can say that I know the people who can take credit for the suit, so I have that great pleasure. But the basic principles behind SciArt Exchange and the Humans in Space Art program are that it's extremely important to make space and science and technology accessible. If you really want it to be something that everyone is thinking about and wanting to be engaged in and understand the impact and supporting politically or financially, all of those things, they need to care. They need to know why they need to care. So they have to also be incredibly motivated. And art creates a marvelous, accessible, and motivating format for us to discuss some very important aspects related to space and science and technology, and to get people so hooked that they just can't wait to learn more. And then all of the marvelous curriculum that my colleagues are representing right here and right now becomes that much more interesting because now they really, really care. So I do think that there's a role for training the whole brain when we want to talk about training STEM and making people care about what we do. And so the Humans in Space Art program has a very basic principle. It's embarrassingly simple. It's international, so I'm a huge fan of international. And basically the basic premise is that we invite people to learn about space and all of the underlying science and technology, and then we ask them to relay their views about the future creatively through visual, literary, musical, and video artwork. Then we take all of that artwork and we display it and perform it online, locally, worldwide, and in space as much as possible so that there's a snowball effect, and now all of their artwork is giving everybody the bug. They want to learn more. They want to learn more. Now, how come that rocket can do what it's doing? How will we get to Mars, and what are the issues? What's my role? So that's the whole principle. It's really quite basic, but there are a lot of really nice and pertinent things that happen through that process. One is you get a whole bunch of people who wouldn't normally be interested in science and technology to get engaged. You train those who are already interested in science and engineering to use their whole brain. They learn how to communicate. They learn how to think about things differently. They learn how to be creative with the knowledge that they have. There's no doubt in our minds that there's a lot of details, analytical skills that need to be learned in order to do good science and technology, but you also need to be able to turn it around sometimes and look at it differently and maybe have a different perspective and maybe value what someone else thinks and the way they look at it and be willing to talk to them about it. So I think that's important. It also makes us better team players when we work with people who have different backgrounds and skill bases, who come from those different countries. There is one aspect of the Humans in Space Art program that I think is particularly relevant to the international part, which is not only does all the art give us multiple perspectives on our space issues and concerns and progress, but also we have been able to twice now have what is a visiting artist program where some of our students have been able to meet each other at events, and they come from China and India and the United States and Australia and all over the world. They meet each other, they're children. They get to know each other. Then later they're on Facebook, and they're continuing to be in contact, and they're keeping in touch with me. You know, I'm hearing about my once children now graduating from Stanford and Harvard and going to Brown and, you know, doing great things. And I've even recently had a NASA co-op who was a previous student of mine have lunch with me because now she's doing NASA work, but she wants to know how she can continue to get the word out through creative communication. How can she make her career include creative communication as well as the analytical work? So these children are the future. They are meeting each other when they're young and they're impressionable. They're learning to respect each other's viewpoints, and they are going to be our ambassadors for the future. So if we really want to do a good job with STEM education, we should keep it international. I totally agree. And we should also train a lot of the other skills and encourage people who might not necessarily become our future engineers, but are still going to contribute to our future workforce. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. We've really had some interesting threads come through the presentations by the various panel members. Networking through common projects, international, cooperation between universities and industry and government agencies, staying out of the way of students, hands-on labs. Let me pick up on the hands-on labs, because one of the things I've found as I've traveled around is this concept of the nanosat is having a huge impact in developing nations at the moment, because it's something that can be done almost at the high school level. In fact, I believe in the Houston area is being done at a grade 6 level. I heard a presentation on that. This is a wonderful way of using some fairly simple things, but need structure, need teamwork and so on, to put something together which, with the appropriate safeguards, has an opportunity for going into space. So, a question I have, perhaps of the panel members or even an audience here, is there something that we can do which is hands-on, which relates to the life sciences, so that the younger people can start getting involved in some hands-on life science experimentation where they do use their different capabilities and so on, and maybe cooperate with other centers to nurture this next group of people who we hope will be the specialists that we've been listening to with such awe during this past few days. Is there anybody who'd like to take that up?
Well, I think certainly there's an opportunity for that. If you think about the size of a CubeSat, you can pack maybe 2, 3, 4 of them in a mid-deck locker. So they're of the same scale of payloads that fly to station to do the kinds of research we're talking about. And we talked earlier today about the bion systems. If we could have pre-packaged life sciences experiments that could be packaged in something of that scale and put together and launched, we could solve some of the problems we talked about, such as with radiation. Do the real experiment instead of guessing at it with Earth analogs. So I think there's a real opportunity there.
Well, during the shuttle days, there used to be programs in which even middle school students were partnered and mentored with people at the various centers, and we flew them in mid-deck experiments and getaway specials. I don't know if those programs still exist anymore, which I think is an opportunity, particularly since Charlie talked about a change of administration, to bring back education that has been farmed out of NASA back into NASA with the subject matter experts and with programs that can work directly with the schools. I think that's important. The CubeSats are becoming very big at the university level, going out of station. I mean, I think it was mentioned well over 100, and there's out of the other nations. You have a few other safety challenges to make in that regard, but for contained experiments, and I know there's a challenge with crew time, but we need to look at strategies, I think, to have more interaction. You were mentioning mentoring, but more applications that have where they can touch and feel space.
I'd like to open. I had some comments over lunchtime recently from our Russian colleagues who indicated that maybe the number of people interested, particularly in the life sciences, wasn't enough to sustain the level that you need to support the future space flights. Do you have any ways of handling this?
Do we need a microphone?
Microphone? Could we have a microphone?
Excuse me, I have a bit misunderstood.
In one of my recent casual conversations,
Yes.
I had indications that there was a concern that there were not enough new life scientists, new graduates, to come and fulfill the responsible roles that would be necessary within Russia for human exploration in the future. Is there a way that you could share with us that you will handle that situation?
Unfortunately, it's such a problem exists. It was a great gap in the average age of the scientists, which was caused by the crisis of 90s. 90s, where people, even my colleagues, want to search for another job and therefore left IBMP for forever, I should say. So me, Vadim, and certain other colleagues, I don't know, maybe 10 or so, remained in IBMP, and the other huge amount, unfortunately, drained. But afterwards, in the latest years, there is coming new people who want to deal with the life science, and in my department, in my lab, it is average age is not bad. It is something flexible with between 35 or something like that. So if I will, including me, so it will be a bit diminished, and so something like 30 or so. So it is not bad. And of course, we people in my department, including four laboratories in my department, 2 microbiological, one sanitary chemistry, and 1 nutrition, try to search for the new people, new students in medical institutions. And there are 3 medical institutions in Moscow, and about 3 medical faculties in different universities. So it is a huge amount for getting new people. The other thing, of course, this is the salary, and here it is depend upon the leader of the laboratories if they succeeded in some state grants or grants of Ministry of Science, so it is okay. But if or contracts or contact or constant deliveries from institutions of Russian Space Agency, Energy, and so on. So in this case, these young collectives are very stable, and nobody think over about such a new job. But of course, it depends. But it's a good situation to start. Of course, rather better than it was in 90s. So we are a bit happy now.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask if you've heard a whole lot of the ideas that people are using to stimulate interest and education in space. Are there any gaps that people in the audience see at the moment that they would like to see addressed, or some specific questions they have about some programs? Yes, Larry, over there.
Right. First, Karl, an attempt to answer your question, and I'm afraid I have forgotten one name. But there's no question in my mind that the opportunity for young people to participate in a space-type experiment, to feel that they are doing something which is similar to work that is being done in space, is a very, very strong motivator. During the Space Lab era, there was a strong attempt in a couple of missions that I was involved with, Space Lab Life Sciences 1, Space Lab Life Sciences 2, and at NeuroLab, to go and produce material which would allow students at the high school level to perform experiments that were close to those that were being done in space. And Jancy, help me if you remember, there was a very good book written by Ron White and Barbara Lujan, yes.
Yeah.
It is available. I think it's a NASA SP, in which they gave a tutorial on the cardiovascular system, or I was involved with the neurovestibular system, and then laid out an experiment that could be done simply and inexpensively in the classroom, and that met with great success. And I know there have been further such activities. The things that the young people remember are the things that they put their hands on, not the things that they were told about and wrote down. So that's the comment. In terms of what's being omitted, well, it's a slightly different subject. So let Graham continue here, and then I'll come back to where we're losing people.
I can be quick. I think one of the most fantastic programs I see is the Spheres program, the Zero Robotics program, where the young middle schoolers and high schoolers are doing coding, and then Scott Kelly and Mikhail Kornienko are flying spheres around on the ISS. So I think it's really great. I came here to frankly check out the Guru Center for some possible uses. But anyway, the day I came to the Guru Center, the Zero Robotics competition was going on, and there was a whole crew there from Texas A&M, like 30, 40 people. So I think this is an example of a really successful program.
There was a question there, yeah.
Regarding some life sciences experiments for students, you mentioned CubeSats. There's also a lot of Cube labs now. There's companies like Space Tango and NanoRacks. Charlie mentioned, keep your eye on Blue Origin. For a little more than $5,000, schools or students can launch a small Cube lab experiment and get 4 minutes of suborbital. But even the Cube labs that go to the International Space Station are about $10,000 to $15,000. That's not that expensive when the cost of crew time and launch and return are all subsidized. But these little Cube labs, amazingly complex experiments. I kind of poo-pooed the idea at first until I started learning what the capabilities are. And there's slime molds with cameras and fixatives and different types of agar and algae experiments and yeast experiments and plant experiments. So there's actually some pretty sophisticated life sciences experiments that are from students that are flying now on the space station.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, actually, the problem to this experiment is the access, because, like $10,000, $15,000 might not seem that much for what it is. It is actually for most of the school, unless you're from California, like a really high-end high school that they can afford that. So, like, one of our idea was to come up with, we started the program, we actually done the pilot program, and now it's in limbo a little bit because we had problem with our partners, which was NanoRacks, by the way. So it was a World Science Fair project, and it's opening up internationally again, because that's our goal there, to all schools around the world for a competition for an experiment on the space station. And actually, there were several key things in there. So everybody would submit their proposal. We had a commission here already built up to discuss and select the one that were getting selected. But then once selected, the school, of course, would have been elected to send the experiment, but they had to share data, and so everybody could actually do data analysis and stuff like that. So you wouldn't drop all the school if they didn't. And it was perceived really well by all the schools that are involved in the program. We did a pilot program locally where we actually went to low-income area, tried to involve the students that will never be exposed to this kind of things, and the success was amazing. There was a school in Galveston that went well above we were hoping for. They came up with a program. They asked me, but it has to be just a high school, or we can also, go. I'm like, it's your program, just we give you guidelines, but you implement it. Well, they went all the way down to like elementary school, that it's different type of, position in their team, and the school had absolutely a blast. We ended up collaborating with them, and one of them came and be a mentors for our program. So it was like, so it works. It just it takes time to try to get the school to access, but definitely there's
Mr. Bolden.
Karl, one thing, in my travels, several of you talked about international partnerships or international things and the like. I was amazed in a recent trip to Jordan to find the significant interest in CubeSats. And it dominantly came from the fact that they now have their 12th, what we call international interns. So we worked for a number of years with the State Department to get clearance to bring foreign students to NASA centers for a month or 2 months, during their undergraduate years. And Jordan, starting with the King Abdullah, really kind of took it to heart, and so the person who is responsible for international interns and CubeSats is the Crown Prince. Another thing that they're doing that's somewhat related to it is now that they know how to do that, because their college students come back knowing how to make CubeSats because most of them did their work at Ames, is now trying to establish an entrepreneurial community in Jordan, something they had never heard of before. And they've got a long way to go, but it's ideas like that you mentioned, Bonnie, that you didn't, but it was mentioned last night that A&M has a campus in Qatar. When we were in UAE, MIT, A&M, there are a number of universities that are in these Middle Eastern countries, and the big thing there is they're trying to find ways to educate their students, because they recognize that if they don't, the alternative is disaster. It's jihadism and things like that for them. So it's very important to them, and we've seen interest at the highest levels of government.
Well, thank you very much for that perspective. I think we're at the time where George would like us to stop. So I'd just like to summarize that we've had a really good set of ideas of work in progress and so on, some good feedback from you, but it does look very much that if we want to make space activity work, there needs to be cooperation between the practitioner organizations and the public and the schools and so on. And there seems to be a fairly strong will for hands-on sharing of ideas and cooperative work where networks established for a lifetime. Thank you so much for your participation, panel members. I think you made a really strong contribution, and look forward to the workshop where we'll be summarizing our ideas.
Catherine, I wanted to leave.